afternoon. Thank you all for coming out and joining us here today at the Tappan Manse Barn. My name is Maria Gagliardi, and I'm the director of the Palisades Free Library. And I'm very pleased to have here with us Daniel Goleman for our, this is our 10th year of doing the Palisades People's Sunday Symposium. So this is great to have everybody come out for this. Daniel Goleman is an internationally known psychologist who lectures frequently to professional groups, business audiences, and neighbors. As a science journalist, Goleman reported on the brain and behavioral sciences for the New York Times for many years. His 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, was on the New York Times bestseller list for a year and a half and has sold more than 5 million copies. And it's also been printed in 40 languages. Apart from his books on emotional intelligence, Goleman has written books on topics including self-deception, creativity, transparency, meditation, social and emotional learning, ecoliteracy, and the ecological crisis. Goleman's work as a science journalist has been recognized with many awards, including the Washburn Award for Science Journalism, a Lifetime Career Award from the American Psychological Association, and he was made a Fellow of the American Association for Advancements of Science and Recognition of his communicating science to the general public. It is my great pleasure to introduce Daniel Goleman.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to see so many friends and familiar faces here. And also great to be speaking in this venerable old building about a venerable old practice, meditation. Seems very fitting. How many people here actually are meditators, even if it's on and off? Okay. How many people are like considering it, maybe? Yeah. Usually more of those than the other. So I think I might have a little bit for everyone, but I'm actually looking forward to whatever your questions might be. I got interested in meditation when I was a college student. The big thing back then was TM. I paid my $35 for a mantra that I later found out in India you could get anywhere for free, but I didn't know that. And I did it religiously, twice a day, 20 minutes. Anybody do TM? It's a very good practice. Yeah, exactly. So, and I was doing it because I was anxious. I was an undergrad and I had jitters, undergrad jitters, and it helped me. It helped me in the morning. In the afternoon, I fell asleep every time. So it helped me catch up with sleep deprivation too. It's doubly effective. And then I went on to graduate school in clinical psychology, and I was able to get a pre-doctoral traveling fellowship. And I went to India, and I was really interested in meeting like professional meditators. What happens if you do this all the time? So I was fortunate enough to meet one old yogi. His name was Neem Kroli Baba. He was known as Ram Dass's guru back then. The department I was in at Harvard was traumatized because 5 years before, Illyrian Alpert had been kicked out for sharing psychedelics with undergrads. And they were a little leery of consciousness. I found out how leery, so to speak, when I came back. So I met Neem Kroli Baba, who was this old yogi, who was remarkable. He was totally present. He was equanimous. He was someone who made you feel loved unconditionally. And the most remarkable thing was that when you're with him, you love people unconditionally too. It was contagious. So that was I'd never met anyone like that. And I met another old Lama. His name is Kunu Rinpoche, very humble, but still the same kind of core of qualities of being. And he was someone who you could, he lived in a very simple room. It's probably like twice as big as this platform. And he slept on a wooden bed, just wooden bed, no mattress. And that was also his, where he hung out during the day. And anyone could come to see him any time of day or night. And I thought about my professors back at Harvard who you could see if you came Tuesday between 2 and 3. So, it was just a different way of relating to people. So I came back to my graduate studies really excited that I was like onto something here. And I said, you know, there's this whole other spectrum of human possibility. In clinical psychology, you study what's wrong with people, like what category can you fit this person in or that person in. And this was a whole upper spectrum of human goodness, essentially. So I thought they'd be very excited about it, but actually they were really hostile and disinterested. I remember one of my professors said, what is the difference between a mantra and my obsessive compulsive patients who can't stop saying shit, 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 shit all the time? I was, like, they just did not get it. We were told, I had a friend who was interested, Richard Davidson, he's a graduate student too. We were told, well, this is a career-ending move if you want to keep going. But despite that, we did our dissertations on meditation. I was interested in meditation as a way of handling stress. That's what I used it for. And my friend Richard Davidson did it on how it sharpens attention. So at the time, this was in the 70s, there were maybe 3 articles in the scientific literature that we could cite in our dissertation. Fast forward now, Davidson and I decided to do a book about this, and there are more than 6,000 peer-reviewed articles on meditation. And he and I had had some sobering experiences along the way. One happened back when we were still in Cambridge. This Swami came to town, and he contacted us, and he said he wanted us to study him. This was the heyday of biofeedback. Biofeedback was then a hot new thing, where if you gave people feedback of a signal like heart rate or blood pressure, they could figure out ways to lower it, which was medically beneficial. So he said, I can handle my heart rate without any feedback. And so we were excited. We got another friend, a guy named John Kabat-Zinn, who went on to design something called mindfulness-based stress reduction. So Johnny and Richie and I and a few others took over a lab at the medical school for an afternoon, and the Swami came. We hooked him up, and we said, okay, raise your heart rate. And he lowered his heart rate. And then we said, okay, lower your heart rate. And he raised his heart rate. And then we said, well, what else can you do? And he said, well, I have something, I call it dog samadhi, you know, I'll do that. And then he went into what we would call in the West atrial fibrillation, which is not a great talent to have. So the Swami, however, anywhere he spoke after that, made a point of saying, and scientists at Harvard have studied my brain. So we realized that meditation research could be used for hype. That was the sobering thing. So we went, when we looked at the 6,000 studies that had been done, we used very rigorous methodological standards to boil it down to 60, like A-level ironclad studies of meditation. And one of the things that had us, made us do that is a study that Davidson had done with our friend John Kabat-Zinn. As I said, he developed a method called mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's used in many hospitals and clinics because it helps people handle chronic pain, live better with chronic symptoms, you know, things you can't get rid of, you just have to handle. So MBSR was really the basis for the fad now of mindfulness. Mindfulness is sweeping into business, into schools, and a lot of research had been done on it. But Davidson had wanted to do a really impeccable study. So he designed something called the Health Enhancement Program, which was about nutrition and exercise. And the people who went through health enhancement did just as many hours of that as people did MBSR. The instructors were just as enthusiastic, and guess what? The outcomes were the same if you asked people. So what that meant was that a lot of the studies that we were looking at were based on what people said after they'd gone through it, and it seemed to be due to just a positive expectation, and we wanted to look for more ironclad findings. So we waded through the 60 and came up with 3 levels of findings. The first is for beginners. How many people have just started any kind of meditation? Okay, so this applies to beginners. We found, for example, that yes, it does help you handle stress biologically. The part of the brain which triggers that stress reaction is less reactive, recovers more quickly. It also has very striking effects with attention. It improves concentration. And actually, this is kind of obvious if you think about it. I don't know what meditations you do, but one of the most common is mindfulness of the breath. Mindfulness of the breath goes like, in fact, let's just do mindfulness of the breath. Just sit up. I'll give you the instructions for free, or whatever you donated. So close your eyes and bring your awareness to your breath. Just be aware of the easy inflow, outflow. Don't try to control your breath. Be aware of it. Pay full attention to the entire inhalation, the entire exhalation, and start with the next breath. And if your mind wanders off, and you notice it wander, bring your mind back to your breath. Start again with the next breath. And if you find yourself thinking something else, your mind's wandered, again, start with the next breath. And now you can open your eyes. That was just a taste. That's a basic exercise, and usually people do it beginning 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you can do in your daily routine. But if you think about it, what we just did is a basic workout in mental fitness, because you're trying to bring your mind to one thing, you hold it there on your focus, and then notice when your mind wanders off. The mind wanders 50% of the time. We know this because of a wonderful study that was done at Harvard, where people were given an app for their phone, and it rang them at random times a day and asked 2 questions. What are you doing and what are you thinking about? And it turns out that on average, the mind wanders 50%, 90% in 3 situations: commuting, sitting in front of a video screen, and at work. Sometimes I say this to companies and I have to apologize for the finding, but it wanders least during romantic moments, 10%. But then who would answer an app at a time like that? I wonder about the data. So anyway, on average, the mind wanders 50%. And in this simple exercise we did, we watch it wander, we notice it wandered, we bring it back. That's like when you work out in a gym. Every time you lift a weight, every rep makes that muscle that much stronger. Every time you bring your mind back, it makes the circuitry for concentration that much stronger. And this is another benefit that shows up right at the beginning. Less mind wandering, better concentration, better memory. Actually, interestingly, this was a surprise finding, better learning. They were doing this with students at the University of California. They found that the students who did mindfulness got scores on the graduate school entrance exam 16 points higher than other students. So it helps retain what you're paying attention to. That's the essence of learning. Other findings have to do with a meditation that's often done with mindfulness, sometimes called loving kindness, where you feel gratitude for people who've been kind to you in your life. You wish them well, and then you wish those same things for yourself. Now, may I be safe, happy, healthy, free from suffering, whatever it is. And then you wish them to people you love. And then you wish the same thing for people you know. And then people around you. And then people everywhere. So it's a kind of a workout of the heart. And it turns out to be a very powerful practice. Within 7 to 8 minutes, you see benefits from it. People become happier, they become more generous, more likely to help someone in need. So it does exactly what it's tailored to do. And then if you look at the long-term meditators, anyone here meditated for like a couple of years, several years? Yeah, so that's long-term meditation. These are people who have day jobs but manage to meditate every day somehow, or sometimes go on a retreat every year. And you see the same effects, but more so. So the attention gets better. Recovery from stress is even quicker. The time it takes you to recover from the peak of stress to calm again is called resilience. So it improves resilience. It makes people even more likely to help a stranger in need or anyone in need. So all of that gets better. And then there's some unexpected findings. This is something Davidson did when he proposed it. People in the field, which is genetics, said this is absurd. I mean, it's very naive. What he did was have long-term meditators meditate for 1 day. And he found that 1 day of meditation downregulated or turned off genes for inflammation. And chronic inflammation is one of the causes or factors in just a range of diseases, from cancer and heart disease to diabetes and arthritis. On the other hand, we can't say yet that meditation helps cure any disease. The mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is used in many, many hospitals and clinics, helps people live with chronic disease and have a better quality of life. No one yet has shown definitively that it's going to help you cure a disease. On the other hand, when it comes to psychotherapy, it turns out that meditation is quite effective for anxiety and depression. Not bipolar disorder, which is very biologically determined, the kind of garden variety anxiety, depression. We don't know about other psychiatric disabilities yet, but they're being looked at, things like PTSD and so on. So, in essence, there's a dose-response relationship. We were able, or I should say Davidson was able, to fly over Olympic-level meditators. These are people who are professionals. They're monks, nuns, yogis, but they live in cultures that support being a monk or a nun or a yogi, and see the value of having someone push this inner art to its extremes. So these are people that have done 12,000 to 62,000 lifetime hours. If you do a 3-year retreat, which is a standard in the Tibetan world, you get credit for 10,000 hours. So 62,000 is really like industrial strength meditation. So there, it's almost discontinuous what they find. I happen to be watching when the first subject, a remarkable guy named Matthew Picard, was run. Matthew was a PhD in microbiology at the Pasteur Institute. His dissertation advisor won a Nobel Prize for their research, but Matthew decided to give it all up and become a full-time monk. He lived in a hermitage in Nepal. And it was only because he was present when the Dalai Lama was in a meeting with some neuroscientists. The Dalai Lama at one point looked at Davidson and he said, what you should do is take these methods which seem to help people manage distressing emotions, take them out of the religious context, bring them to the lab, study them as rigorously as you can, and if there are benefits, spread them as widely as they can. You know, why should it just be for Buddhists? It should be for anyone who can benefit. That's part of why there are so many studies now, because they're using that paradigm. So these people, the monks and the nuns and the yogis, are doing it within the traditional context in an Asian culture. And so Ricard, who was also helping to design the study, because he was both a scientist and a yogi, was put in an MRI. Have you been in an MRI? It's like a human cigar tube. It's like very noisy. These magnets clank around you. And so he goes in and he's asked to do the following. We want you to try 4 different kinds of meditation. Those of you who meditate, you find it sometimes takes you a little while to settle down. like really to focus. I know I do. So Matthew was supposed to do, say, a concentration meditation for 90 seconds. And then, when he hears a buzzer, he's supposed to do nothing for 60 seconds, and then 90 seconds, and 60, 90, 60, like that. Which seemed completely impossible to me, but he did it perfectly. So one of the things that we find is amazing mental agility at that level of practice. And each of the 4 meditations he did had a unique neural signature. So something was going on there, the MRI showed, fMRI. The program of research has identified some things never seen before by neuroscience in these advanced yogis. One has to do with what's called a gamma wave. When you have a really great creative insight, like, wow, that's the solution, you get a high amplitude wave in your EEG called gamma. It lasts about a quarter second, half second. You can get the same gamma if you vividly imagine biting into a peach, and the moment the sound and the taste and the smell and everything comes together, you get a short-lived gamma. It's about the only time it's seen ordinarily. Turns out that these yogis have gamma in their EEG most all the time. That's their normal state. We don't know phenomenologically what that would be like, but it's pretty cool from a scientific point of view. Another thing that was discovered was that, well, they use a kind of diabolical device. It's a plate that heats precisely to the range of heat that is horribly painful but will not burn you. And it's a standard device in laboratory research on pain. And they used it with just a random group of people. And if you're told, first you get like a split-second taste of what it's like. If you're told in 10 seconds you're going to feel that pain for 10 seconds, the pain center in your brain lights up as though you were feeling the pain already. And then the pain stops, and it still lights up for 10 more seconds. Except if you're one of these yogis. If you're told you're going to feel that pain in 10 seconds, nothing happens until you feel the pain. Then the sensory centers for registering the pain light up, but not the emotional centers for reacting to the pain. And then the pain stops, flat again, nothing. So those brains are different. Oh, that reminds me of another encouraging finding. It seems to be that if you're a long-term meditator, the gradual aging of the brain is slowed, which at my age, as a meditator, I'm happy to hear. We need all the help we can get. So anyway, what are the practical benefits? Very few people will be professionals. Like, that's a very narrow slice of humanity. They go very deep, but it's not very wide when you think about it. More people are long-term meditators in the forms they've been brought to the West, like the people in this room apparently, myself. But that's still a fairly narrow band. And then there are people who are like doing mindfulness apps or getting into business or in schools. And that's going to go widest, I think, although it may not go deepest. I was at a school in Spanish Harlem. There's 7-year-olds, and half the kids in the classroom, I was told, had special needs, ADHD, whatever, even Asperger's spectrum, things like that. I thought the class would be quite chaotic, but actually the kids were calm and very focused. The teacher said, here's why. Every day we do this, and then they started belly buddies. And belly buddies, one by one, when your name is called, you go to your cubby, you get your favorite stuffed animal, you find a place to lie down in a rug, you put that on your belly, and you watch it rise on the in-breath, fall on the out-breath. We just did this. It's mindfulness, but it's for 7-year-olds. And it keeps them very calm and focused. In fact, it seems to enhance something technically called cognitive control, the ability to manage disturbing emotions and to keep your mind focused where you want it to be. It turns out it's the same circuitry in the prefrontal cortex, gets stronger. There was a famous study of cognitive control. It's called the marshmallow test. Some of you may know about it. It's done with 4-year-olds at Stanford University. One by one, kids from the preschool are brought in to a room, juicy marshmallow put in front of them, and they're told, you could have this now, but if you wait and don't eat it till I get back, you could have 2 then. Then the experimenter leaves the room, and those poor kids are staring at that marshmallow. About a third of them grab it on the spot, about a third wait the endless 7 minutes or whatever, until the experimenter comes back, they get 2. They're tracked down 14 years later as they're graduating high school, and the groups are compared, the kids who grabbed and the kids who waited. And they find that the kids who grab don't get along as well with their peers, still can't delay gratification in pursuit of their goals, which is what this is directly. And big surprise on the SAT, which at that time was 1,600 total points, the kids who waited had a 210-point advantage, which is huge. I went to Princeton and told the people who make the SAT about it. They were stunned. I said, that's as big as the difference we find between kids from a family where the parents have only elementary school education or kids with a parent with an advanced degree. It's a stunning difference. But these are all kids at Stanford. And it seems to be because of this variable cognitive control, which is independent of other abilities. There was a study done in New Zealand where they measured cognitive control in kids 4 to 8, including the marshmallow test, tracked them down in their 30s. You can do this in New Zealand. You could not do that here, I'm sure, because in New Zealand there's nowhere to go. So they tracked them down, and they found that cognitive control in childhood was a better predictor of your financial success and your health in your 30s than your IQ as a kid or the wealth of the family you grew up in. It kind of levels the playing field, and it's a completely independent variable. I was in Cape Cod, and the woman there had brought what's called social emotional learning, which is I've been an advocate of for years. Basically, it teaches the skills of emotional intelligence to kids, K through 12. It's self-awareness, self-management, empathy, social skill, and mindfulness, I think, plays a role in that. She brought mindfulness to the schools. And she said, she just heard this great story. It's a snowy day, like today, on the Cape Cod. This 5-year-old wants to go out and play in the snow, and the mom says to this kid, you have to put your snowsuit on before you can play in the snow. And this kid has a meltdown. He's having a tantrum, he's pounding the floor, I won't put it on. You know, just hopeless. And then all of a sudden he stops, gets up, goes to his room. He's in there for a minute or two, comes out, calmly puts on the snowsuit and goes out. Or starts to go out. And the mom says, hey, what just happened? And he says, oh, well, my guard dog got really upset. So I had my wise owl talk to it. This is neuroscience for 5-year-olds. It's basically talking about the prefrontal cortex, the executive center, and the amygdala, the center that makes you have a tantrum. And he was learning mindfulness. I taught mindfulness to a kid, 5-year-old kid who came to Thanksgiving last year. He was wearing a Batman suit. And I said to him, do you know how Batman got his powers? And he wanted to know. So I said, well, sit down and just watch your breath. He sat still for about 30 minutes without moving, watching. I was astounded. So you can teach it at a very early age. And I think that we'd all be better off if we did. So let me stop there and ask for any questions you might have. Yes?
So you mentioned teaching at a very young age. Well,
Yeah.
What do you do with a teenager who's 14 that starts to think they know everything and that wants to poo-poo this the second you bring it up, and there's someone that is having trouble focusing, bing, bing, bing all over the place, and you want to get them to understand and give this a chance?
Yeah. So you get his best friends to convince him. Because teenagers don't want to hear their parents, right? I actually did an instructional cassette for teens. It's called Focus for Teens. I have Focus for Kids, Focus for Teens on the web. But I think a live instructor is better. There are programs only for teens. There's something called IB.me, which has several retreats a year for teens only. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but I think peers doing it is better than mom saying, do this. Yeah. Yes?
What do you think of those children with the marshmallow study? What made the children who were able to wait?
Oh, why were they better? Yeah, well, you know, cognitive control is really about the ability to manage your impulse. And it might be nature, it might be nurture, or probably both. Maybe some kids are born better able to do it. Maybe some families are better able to help kids learn how to do it. I know it's teachable, but it might be to some extent genetic too, we don't know. But there are those differences from the beginning. Yeah.
What kinds of molecular changes have been identified in meditation?
So there are some genomic changes that I mentioned, but I don't think there's much work yet going on at the molecular level. I'd love to see it. Are you in that area of science?
Not anymore.
Used to be. Well, see, we need graduate students for this kind of thing.
I could do it again.
You could do it again. Well, there are a lot of potential subjects right in this room, so good luck. Yeah.
How do you have genetic changes?
How do you have genetic changes?
Without molecular changes.
Well, but see, you don't know what to infer from the genetic. I mean, it's not my field, so correct me if I'm wrong. But you could have a genetic change and not know about molecular change. Is that right? Or
Well, a genetic change leads to changes in molecules, even though they have not been identified, because it doesn't just happen.
Exactly.
So when a gene expresses itself,
then different proteins
you expect that different proteins or different molecules
Exactly.
will either appear or not appear, things will be activated or inactivated.
Exactly, but that study remains to be done.
Yeah.
That's a next step. So it's very promising, but there's lots of next steps in this area, like every other area of science. Yes?
I noticed in your discussion of the subject of meditation, which is kind of a mental phenomenon, you are validating it with scientific underpinning.
Yes.
I'm wondering whether meditation spurs psychic phenomenon that doesn't have scientific underpinning.
So Joan is pointing out that I'm talking about scientific findings about a phenomenological experience or method, meditation. Are there changes at that level, the phenomenological level? Is that what you mean by the psychic level? Yeah, absolutely there are. However, people like the Dalai Lama really encourage scientific research because he sees science as a language which is understood around the world. Maybe not in Alabama, but other places. And he thought that that would be more convincing. But the classical literature in every meditative tradition, and there are meditative traditions in every major world religion, will talk about phenomenological changes. Yeah, Alan.
Is there a role for music in meditation?
Is there a role for music? Some meditations are rhythmic. They're movement meditations. There could be a dance that's a meditation. They're walking meditation. I don't know about any singing meditation. So that's an interesting question. I don't know about music and meditation. I better figure it out because I'm supposed to be on a panel with the Rubin Museum on meditation and music in a couple weeks. So if you have any thoughts, let me know. There's a book about that? Meditation, music in the brain or meditation in music?
Meditation in the brain, and which includes meditation.
Well, there are a lot of books on meditation in the brain. I'm looking for the music part.
Right, yeah. Google it, you'll find it.
Google it, okay. That's what I was going to do.
Well, music requires real concentration.
Exactly.
But what about chant?
Yeah, and chant, you could, if you regarded chant as music, then chants are part of many meditative traditions, absolutely.
Isn't there
Yeah, and for example, the oldest meditation I know about in the Christian tradition was the Desert Fathers in the 2nd century in the Egyptian desert. And they were, their chant and mantra was Kyrie eleison. And now they've moved to Athos. It's continued, the tradition continues there. In the back, yeah.
Yes, you mentioned mindfulness meditation and transcendental meditation. So what are the main difference between them two? And also, if do mantras help your meditation mantras? Do they help your meditation?
So there are many kinds of meditation. Mindfulness is the kind of flavor du jour everyone's heard about. Some people think mindfulness refers to all meditation. Actually, it's not. It's one kind of meditation, or it's a sub-method in meditations. So in mindfulness, you monitor your mind. It's used in therapy. There's something called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which my wife, Daniel Goleman, was the first to put those together, mindfulness cognitive therapy. But now it's a very hot topic, a lot of research on that. And mindfulness has been used as an adjunct in a lot of different methods. However, mindfulness is just one way to manage attention. You could concentrate, like Matthew Ricard did. But he concentrated just on something he was looking at. A mantra, which is a sound you repeat over and over. Kyrie eleison is actually a mantra. I had a mantra in TM. That's a classical method, and it's another way to manage the mind and train it not to wander, but to stay. And it also has biological benefits, which are shared by other meditations, but it's very calming and focusing. There's a lot of work on that. Yes?
I have a question about music. It seems to me that musicians, I wonder if anybody has ever tested their concentration.
Oh.
Because I find, I meditated off and on for years.
I see.
And I really love to listen to music. And when you're listening totally to music, sometimes you can just be there listening and nothing else. And sometimes other things get in the way. But I think meditation helps with that. I think any really professional musician has that quality of attention.
I would say that the ability to focus on the one thing that matters now is a common denominator in every expert skill. You can't become an expert in anything unless you can focus 100%. So music is one, performing arts, sports, art, chess, science. I think the ability to concentrate is essential for all of them. That's why I think it's great that they're starting to help kids with their attention in school. There's this big billion-dollar industry for ADHD, giving kids medications. There was a large multi-site study done that showed that those medications work well in the first year, so-so the second year, not much at all after the third year. But isn't it interesting that we've never tried to help kids learn to manage their attention, which seems like a no-brainer, but there's no money in it, essentially. But it's starting to happen, and the first, pilot results are very promising. Yes?
Could you speak a little more about the sort of loving kindness kind of mindfulness?
Sure.
Meditation?
So, loving kindness. So there's a classic study in social psychology that's relevant. It was done at a divinity school at Princeton. Students were told that they're going to give a practice sermon, and half of them were given as the topic the parable of the Good Samaritan, the man who stopped to help the stranger in need by the side of the road. The other half are given random Bible topics, and then they're given some time to prepare, and then one by one they go to another building to give their practice sermon, be evaluated. And as they go across the courtyard, they pass a man who's bent over and moaning in pain. The question is, do they stop to help the stranger in need? How many people think that the parable of the Good Samaritan predicts that you'll stop now? Exactly right. It doesn't. Oh, a few of you thought it did. No. It turned out that what mattered was how much time pressure you thought you were under. If you thought you're late, there's like no way are you going to stop down. So this is the, our lives are like that. We have so much on our to-do list, on our mind, and there's this spectrum that runs from total self-absorption to noticing the other person, tuning into their state, realizing they need something, empathizing, and then providing that if you can. That's the basis of compassion, but it's not going to happen if you don't notice them. So loving kindness meditation is a way of priming yourself to be ready to notice. And that's the research on it seems to show the more you do that, the more likely you are to notice someone in need and help them if you can. So that's basically it. And loving kindness is just a variant of something that's, again, found in most every religious tradition in one way or another.
One of the most horrifying stories I ever heard was like in The End of Thin Air, when John Carter talks about people climbing Everest and passing it because they want to get to the top, and the time is limited, and they pass right by people who are dying of thirst on the way.
Is
They
that
don't
right?
stop to give them water,
Yeah.
which is, to me, appalling, shocking, incomprehensible that they had to get to the top. That was their goal.
Yeah, so you could say that focus is not everything. You need to be open to other people. Yes.
I'm curious about your own meditation practice.
Sure.
How's it evolved over the years when you do?
How does my meditation? So I started with TM, and then when I went to India, I got very interested in something called insight meditation, which mindfulness is derived from. I was in some initial courses with some of the main teachers of that, Joseph Goldstein, who Sharon Salzberg, who founded the Insight Meditation Society over there. And then Tara and I have evolved from that to kind of Tibetan cousin called Dzogchen, which we now are studying. And so I've always been interested in all kinds of meditation, but I also think that you get more benefit from picking one and sticking to it instead of just trying everything that comes along. Do you have a question?
I wanted to go back, you had mentioned earlier you had a professor that wasn't clear on the difference between a mantra and OCD.
Yeah.
And I want to know what your thoughts are on someone who's experiencing OCD and they're doing these rituals. Would offering them a mantra to replace that help them?
I don't know. I really don't know. Interesting question.
Do you think that's possible? That would be a benefit?
Well, they might just work it into another ritual practice. Because the difference between the mantra and OCD is the mantra is voluntary, and it has secondary benefits, and OCD has secondary benefits, but they're the wrong ones. Yeah.
I have one question. Is there any sort of research around doing the different types that you just mentioned that you kind of concentrate on one and going further and deeper on the one?
Sure.
If you do switch between multiple types, is there anything that the benefit becomes much greater? Especially you stay on one path, are you doing one particular thing or kind of jumping around?
So the question is about doing one kind of meditation versus trying many. My own philosophy is it's good to try many at the start and then hit on one. It's like picking a major in college or marrying someone. Same principle, really. Yeah. And then stick with it.
I guess in conjunction with that is, are the different ones that you're focusing on, are there different benefits? So you were saying that there is...
Oh, are there different benefits? Yes. So the research, which I think is too narrow so far, mostly is focused on focusing, on mindfulness, on loving kindness, but there are like dozens and dozens of meditations that have never been studied. There are whirling dervishes. It's a Sufi meditation. I once in Istanbul was able to go to a mosque where they do that daily, and it's clearly meditative. but it's never been studied. There's visualizations, there's many, many, many kinds, so we don't know what the payoffs are. And they probably share some common core, and then probably have some unique things they add, depending on what they are. Yes?
Any dose response data?
Rough dose response. So there seems to, dose response mainly, essentially means the more you do it, the better it gets.
Well, that would be a linear response.
Yeah, but there's never been a longitudinal study of one group doing one meditation over years, which would answer that question. The longest has been 3 months.
There could be cross-sectional data.
Say again?
Cross-sectional data?
There's cross-sectional data, but it's uneven because the data sets don't map. The N, that's a technical, are you in the field?
Yeah, I'm a scientist.
Yeah, there you go. So the ends don't match up, so you can't.
So there's never been like a straightforward cross-sectional, study looking at people who do it at different doses, different times?
Well, yeah, so far it has been done in a methodologically neat way. Yeah, there's a lot of studies that remain to be done. Now, that's, I think, essential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that epidemiological now? It's like just going out there and just scanning?
Well, there's a combination of, remember we looked at the most rigorous studies, so they were usually, they had either a biological, a neural, or a cognitive assessment, which couldn't be gamed. People didn't know it was being tested. The best ones had an active control group, so that you can find out if it's just expectancy or other variables that sway outcomes. But this is a new field, actually. There's 6,000 studies, more than half have been in the last 5 years. And there's not a lot of money for this.
What's your result though? I mean,
Sorry?
what do you feel would be a good amount per day, per week, or something?
What, a good amount of meditation?
Yeah.
If it's dose response, the more the better, right?
So, I don't know, I mean, do you
Yeah.
think so? Is there a point of limiting return?
This is an empirical question.
Well, I think you want to know, like, I would like to know, like, what can I do that's going to be most beneficial but not take too much time?
Oh, for meditation. There's a maxim that deals with that. It says, the very best meditation is the one you will do. And that's very personal. You have to make it a priority in your day. I mean, we do physical workouts, a lot of us, because we know it's going to pay off. What about a mental workout? That's like a new concept, but it's a matter of what matters.
And with sincerity.
Exactly, your motivation, all of that. Yeah. I like to do as much as I can every day. Yeah. My dissertation topic was meditation as an intervention in stress reactivity. Yeah, I used a movie that was made by the Canadian Film Board to inspire woodworkers to use their safety devices. And there are 3 accidents in it. One of them, first one is Joe and Al are talking, different Al, not this Al. And Joe has a huge piece of plywood, and there's a big circle saw that he's running the plywood in, and he's not using his safety device. It's like a horror movie. You know, it pans to the Joe and Al talking, and the thumb and the saw blade, Joe and Al, and the thumb's closer to the saw. And so I was watching people's reaction. I was in the control room. You could see how, when the saw hit the thumb, it was like a peak, and then people would go down. There were 3 of those. And it turned out if you meditated before you saw that you recovered more quickly. It wasn't that you didn't have a reaction. Everybody has a reaction. But you got over it more quickly. Remember, that's the definition of resilience. Yeah. Yes?
So do you think that TM had its success early on because people want a definition of time in which to, like, how long do I need to take to get a result? Because they sell it to you in such a structured manner.
Yeah, I think TM came along at the right time, for one thing. There was this new interest in Eastern methods. and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi showed up. He got some very influential people to do it, the Beatles at the time, that helped. He had a neat package, it seemed manageable, 20 minutes twice a day, I could do that. What I didn't know, this is what I was so shocked by when I got to India. My mantra, which I paid $35 for, which is a lot of money back then, was in the back of a book and a list of what are called seed syllables. And I thought, wow, I could have got that for nothing. But it might not have been the same because of the context, the way in which it was given, and the instruction. Yeah. The TM literature, unfortunately, we really wanted to find studies on TM, but we couldn't find any that met our criteria. There are many, many that have been done. Yeah. And I think it's basically a good meditation method, just overpriced. What's more now? So, yeah.
Why is it so easy to fall asleep when you're meditating?
Why is it so easy to fall asleep when you're meditating? I think the answer has to do with how tired you are when you start and how well you slept the night before. I find when I meditate in the morning, I'm perfectly alert. When I meditate at night, I'm like asleep before I know it. Yeah. I think having, I don't recommend it as a method to fall asleep. It's supposed to be a way to get more alert and attentive. But the fact is, if you can do something that turns off those thoughts that keep you awake, it's a nice way to fall asleep. Yes, last question.
I know there's a Japanese term for meditation and healing in nature. And I find that, I wouldn't call it meditation, but breathing and relaxing and getting in touch with loving kindness comes to me more easily in nature, so that I have to incorporate, and have to sounds like it's a chore, just as part of my being. Nature seems to speed up the positive effects in me. Is there any study about the ambient or the environment that you're in when you're meditating?
Yeah, so there's no direct study that I know of, but I know several studies that suggest there's a biological benefit from being in nature, and the classical traditions of meditation all recommend that you go into nature if you're going to do a serious meditation retreat, that you go away from your normal routine, and that you be in a mountain or in a forest or at the ocean, on an island, somewhere like that. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks, neighbors, for coming too.